What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors finds himself in the hot seat, facing questions he never expected on live television? Tonight, we're diving into one of the most shocking moments in talk show history, when Liam Neeson, the man known for his calm demeanor and commanding presence, reached his breaking point on The Graham Norton Show. This wasn't just any ordinary celebrity spat. This was a complete meltdown that left the studio audience stunned and the host scrambling. To regain control, before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really pushed Neeson over the edge. The red recording light was glowing bright in the BBC studios as Graham Norton settled into his iconic chair, his usual cheeky grin plastered across his face. The audience was buzzing with anticipation, cameras were rolling, and everything seemed perfect for another night of celebrity banter and harmless fun. Liam Neeson sat comfortably on the famous red sofa, looking every bit the distinguished gentleman that audiences had come to expect. The interview had started smoothly enough, with Norton cracking jokes about Neeson's latest action thriller and the actor playing along with his characteristic dry wit. "So Liam," Norton said, leaning forward with that mischievous glint in his, "I have to ask about something that's been making the rounds on social media. There's this video of you at a charity event last month, and well, let's just say the internet has had quite a field day with it." Neeson's expression shifted slightly, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Graham." "Oh, come on, you must have seen it," Norton pressed, his voice taking on that sing-song quality he used when he thought he was onto something juicy. "The one where you're giving that speech about endangered wildlife. And there's this rather unfortunate moment with the microphone." The audience began to chuckle, sensing the setup for what they assumed would be another harmless celebrity embarrassment story. But something in Neeson's posture suggested this wasn't going to play out as expected. "I gave a heartfelt speech about conservation efforts," Neeson replied, his voice steady but with an edge creeping in. "I'm not sure why that would be fodder for entertainment." Norton, either missing the warning signs or choosing to ignore them, pushed forward with his trademark persistence. "Well, it's not so much the speech itself, but more the bit where you accidentally knocked over the podium and then, well, the microphone picked up some rather colorful language." "That was a private moment of frustration," Neeson said, his hands clasping together in his lap. "I was there to support a cause I care deeply about." The host's grin widened, clearly thinking he was building to a great punchline, but surely you can see the humor in it. "I mean, here you are, this serious dramatic actor, talking about protecting polar bears, and then wham, down goes the podium. And out comes this string of words that would make a sailor blush." The studio audience was eating it up, their laughter growing louder with each detail, Norton added, but those paying close attention could see that Neeson was not sharing in the amusement. His knuckles were white now, and there was a dangerous stillness about him that anyone familiar with his more intense film roles would recognize. "Graham," Neeson said slowly, his Irish accent becoming more pronounced as it always did when his emotions were running high, "I'm going to stop you right there." But Norton was on a roll now, the audience reaction feeding his energy. "And then, oh, this is the best part, you tried to set the podium back up, but it was one of those folding ones, and it just kept collapsing, and every time it fell, the microphone caught another expletive." "That's enough," Neeson said, his voice dropping to that low, menacing tone that had made him famous in action films. Norton finally seemed to register that something was wrong, but instead of backing down, he doubled down, perhaps thinking he could win the actor over with charm. "Oh, lighten up, Liam, it's just a bit of fun. The video's got millions of views. People love seeing celebrities being human." "Human," Neeson repeated, his eyes narrowing. "You think exploiting someone's moment of genuine passion for a cause they believe in is showing them being human?" The laughter in the studio began to die down as the tension became palpable. Norton's smile faltered for just a moment before he tried to regain his footing. "I'm just saying, it's relatable. We've all had those moments where things don't go according to plan. Have you?" Neeson asked, leaning forward slightly. "Have you ever stood in front of a room full of people, trying to raise money to save animals that are literally dying because of human greed and stupidity, only to have that moment turned into a punchline for people's entertainment?" Norton's laugh became forced, uncomfortable. "Well, no. But nothing," Neeson interrupted, his voice rising just enough to cut through any remaining chatter in the audience. "You sit here in your comfortable studio, making jokes about other people's misfortunes, and you call it entertainment." The host tried to regain control. "Liam, I think you're taking this a bit too seriously. It's all in good fun." "Good fun?" Neeson's voice was getting dangerously quiet again. "Tell me, Graham, what exactly is fun about mocking someone who's trying to make a difference in the world?" Norton shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly realizing he had misjudged his guest's mood. But his years of hosting experience kicked in as he attempted to smooth things over with his usual deflection tactics. "Look, I'm not mocking anyone. I'm just pointing out that these things happen, and sometimes we need to laugh at ourselves." "Laugh at ourselves?" Neeson's voice carried a bitter edge now, Is that what you think this is about, self-deprecation? The audience had gone completely silent, sensing that this was no longer the playful celebrity roasting they had come to expect from the show. The camera operators were getting signals from the control room, zooming in to catch every micro-expression on both men's faces. Norton tried another approach, his tone becoming more conciliatory. Liam, I respect what you do for charity. Truly I do. But part of being in the public eye means accepting that sometimes these moments get shared. Shared, Neeson repeated, his eyebrows raising in disbelief. You mean exploited for cheap laughs while the actual message gets completely lost? That's not what I meant, Norton protested, but his usual confidence was wavering. Isn't it though? Neeson pressed, turning slightly in his seat to face the host more directly. When was the last time you used your platform to actually discuss the issues these charities are fighting for, rather than just mining them for comedy gold? Norton's smile was becoming more strained by the second. We do plenty of serious segments on this show. Do you? Neeson challenged, or do you just use serious topics as setups for punchlines? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like everything gets filtered through this lens of ironic detachment. The host tried to regain his footing by appealing to the audience. I think our viewers appreciate a bit of levity with their news. Levity. Neeson said the word like it left a bad taste in his mouth. That's an interesting way to describe making light of climate change, species extinction, and human suffering. Norton's patience was clearly wearing thin, now, his professional veneer beginning to crack. Now hold on, that's completely unfair. I never made light of any of those things. Didn't you? Neeson's voice was steady but carried the weight of years of frustration. Every time someone comes on this show to discuss something meaningful, you find a way to turn it into entertainment. You reduce their passion to a punchline. That's not true, Norton shot back, his own Irish accent becoming more pronounced as his defenses went up. I give people a platform to talk about their projects and causes. A platform, Neeson laughed, but there was no humor in it. You give them a stage to be your dancing monkeys while you pull the strings and direct the show toward whatever gets the biggest laugh. The studio was so quiet now that you could hear the hum of the cameras and the nervous shuffling of audience members in their seats. Norton's production team was frantically gesturing from behind the cameras, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this train wreck continue. I resent that characterization, Norton said, his voice rising slightly. I treat all my guests with respect. Neeson's voice dropped again to that dangerous whisper. You just spent 10 minutes trying to get me to laugh about a moment where I was genuinely trying to help save endangered species. How exactly is that respectful? Norton threw his hands up in frustration. It was just a funny moment. Liam, people relate to that kind of thing. People relate to failure. Neeson corrected. They relate to watching someone they admire stumble and fall because it makes them feel better about their own shortcomings, and you feed that appetite. That's incredibly cynical, Norton countered, his professional mask slipping further. Is it, Neeson asked, or is it honest? When someone comes on your show to talk about their new film, how long does it take before you're asking about their personal scandals, their embarrassing moments, their failures? Norton's jaw tightened. I ask the questions people want to hear answered. No, Neeson said firmly, you ask the questions that will get the most reaction. There's a difference. The host tried to regain control of the conversation. Look, we're clearly having a philosophical disagreement about the nature of entertainment here. Philosophy. Neeson's voice was incredulous. This isn't philosophy, Graham. This is about basic human decency. About whether we lift each other up or tear each other down for sport. Norton's frustration was becoming more visible now. I'm not tearing anyone down. I'm having conversations. Are you, Neeson challenged? Or are you conducting interviews designed to extract the most entertaining content, regardless of the cost to your guest's dignity? The tension in the studio was reaching a breaking point, with both men now leaning forward in their chairs, the pretense of casual conversation completely abandoned. Norton's producers were making increasingly frantic hand signals, but the host seemed determined to defend his approach. My show has launched careers, raised awareness for countless causes, and brought joy to millions of viewers, Norton said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. At what cost? Neeson fired back immediately. How many people have left this studio feeling diminished, feeling like their genuine concerns were treated as jokes? Norton's face was flushed now, his usual composure completely shattered as he stood up from his chair. You know what, Liam? I've been doing this for decades, and I've never had a guest sit here and lecture me about how I do my job. Neeson remained seated, but his posture was rigid. Maybe that's because most of your guests are too polite or too desperate for publicity to tell you the truth. The truth. Norton's voice cracked slightly. The truth is that you're being sanctimonious and such. You think you're better than everyone else because you do charity work. The audience gasped audibly at the host's words, sensing that he had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Neeson's face went very still, and when he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. I think I'm someone who believes that when you have a platform, you have a responsibility to use it wisely. Norton laughed harshly. Oh, spare me the moral superiority. You make violent movies where you kill dozens of people, but somehow I'm the one who's morally bankrupt. The studio fell into complete silence. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze, understanding that something irreversible had just happened. Neeson's eyes went cold in a way that anyone who had seen his films would recognize. But this wasn't acting. What did you just say? Neeson's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried such menace that several audience members actually leaned back in their seats. Norton seemed to realize his mistake, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. I'm just saying, let's not pretend you're some kind of saint here. Your entire career is built on glorifying violence. My career, Neeson said slowly, rising from the sofa with deliberate control, is built on telling stories. Stories about people who face impossible odds and find the strength to fight back. Stories about protecting the innocent and standing up for what's right. By shooting people, Norton shot back, his voice becoming shrill. In fiction, Neeson replied, his voice growing stronger. In carefully crafted narratives that explore themes of justice, redemption, and the human condition, what you do is real. The people you mock, the causes you trivialize, the dignity you strip away, that's all real. Norton was breathing heavily now, clearly rattled by the turn the conversation had taken. I don't mock people, don't you? Neeson took a step closer to the host's desk. You just mocked me for caring about endangered animals. You mocked my attempt to make a difference in the world. And then, when I called you out on it, you attacked my profession and questioned my character. The host tried to regain some semblance of control. I was making a point about consistency. No, Neeson's voice was like steel now. You were deflecting. You were trying to tear me down because I had the audacity to suggest that maybe, just maybe, you could do better. Norton's hands were shaking slightly as he gripped the edge of his desk. I don't have to listen to this from someone who pretends to be a hero on screen, but probably doesn't care about anything except his paycheck. The words hung in the air like a poison cloud. The audience seemed to collectively hold its breath, waiting for Neeson's response. The actor stood perfectly still for a long moment, his face a mask of controlled fury. You know what the difference is between you and me, Graham? Neeson's voice was conversational now, which somehow made it more terrifying. When I play a character who seeks justice, it's because I understand what justice means. When I portray someone who protects the innocent, it's because I know what innocence is worth protecting. Norton opened his mouth to respond, but Neeson held up a hand to stop him. But you, Neeson continued, you sit in your chair every night, surrounded by applause and laughter, and you think that gives you the right to diminish anyone who walks through that door. You think entertainment excuses cruelty. It's not cruel, Norton protested weakly, isn't it? Neeson's voice rose for the first time, making several audience members jump. When you take someone's moment of genuine passion and turn it into a punchline, what would you call that? When you suggest that caring about something meaningful makes someone sanctimonious, what is that, if not cruel? Norton tried one more deflection. You're taking this way too personally. Maybe because it is personal, Neeson replied, his voice dropping back to that dangerous whisper. Maybe because every time someone like you reduces genuine human emotion to entertainment, you make the world a little bit smaller, a little bit meaner, a little bit less hopeful. The host was visibly sweating now. I think we should take a commercial break. No, Neeson said firmly. I think we should finish this conversation. Because this is what real talk looks like, Graham. This is what happens when someone refuses to be your performing seal. Norton looked desperately toward his producers, but they seemed frozen, unsure whether this was television gold or a complete disaster. You want to know what I really think? Neeson asked, though it was clearly rhetorical. I think you've spent so long hiding behind humor. An irony that you've forgotten what it feels like to care about something without immediately looking for the joke. Norton's face had gone pale, beads of sweat visible on his forehead as he struggled to find words. Liam, I think you're overreacting to what was meant to be a lighthearted moment. Lighthearted. Neeson repeated the words like they were foreign. To him, you keep using that phrase as if it absolves you of responsibility for the impact of your words. The host made one final attempt to salvage the situation. Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we start over? Neeson looked at him with something approaching pity. Start over. You think you can just reset this conversation? Like it's a video game? You think you can attack my character, mock my values, and then wave your hand and make it all disappear? I didn't attack your character, Norton protested, but his voice lacked conviction. You questioned my motives for doing charity work, Neeson said quietly. You suggested that I don't actually care about the causes I support. You implied that my entire career is morally questionable. If that's not attacking someone's character, what would you call it? Norton's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. The silence stretched on, broken only by the mechanical hum of the cameras that continued rolling, capturing every excruciating second. You know what the truly sad part is? Neeson continued, his voice taking on a tone of genuine disappointment. You could have used this moment to actually discuss conservation efforts. You could have asked me about the organizations I work with, the progress we're making, the challenges we face. Instead, you chose to focus on my moment of human frustration because it was easier to get a laugh. Norton finally found his voice again. The audience expects a certain kind of show. The audience expects what you give them, Neeson corrected. And what you give them is a steady diet of celebrity embarrassment and manufactured controversy. You've trained them to expect the worst of people. The actor began moving toward the edge of the stage area, his intentions becoming clear to everyone in the studio. "Where are you going?" Norton asked, panic creeping into his voice. "I'm leaving," Neeson said simply, "because I refuse to sit here and pretend that this kind of behavior is acceptable." Norton stood up quickly. "You can't just walk off the show. Watch me," Neeson replied, continuing his measured walk toward the exit. "This is live television," Norton called after him, his voice rising. "You're ruining the show." Neeson stopped and turned back one final time. "No, Graham. You ruined the show the moment you decided that my genuine concern for endangered wildlife was less important than getting a cheap laugh from your audience." The host was desperate now. "We can edit this out. Start fresh with a different topic." "Edit it out." Neeson's voice carried a note of dark amusement. "You want to pretend this conversation never happened. That's exactly the problem. You want to sanitize everything, remove any real human emotion, any genuine conflict, anything that might make people uncomfortable or force them to think." Norton took a step forward. "That's not what I meant. But it's what you do," Neeson said, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "Every night. You take real people with real feelings and real struggles, and you sand off all the rough edges until they're nothing but smooth, entertaining surfaces for your audience to laugh." The studio audience was watching this unfold like spectators at a car crash, unable to look away but increasingly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. "I've built a career on honesty," Neeson continued, his hand now on the studio door, "on portraying characters who stand up for their principles, who refuse to compromise their values for the sake of convenience. I'm not going to abandon those principles now just to save your show." Norton made one last desperate attempt. "Think about your fans. They tune in to see you." "My fans," Neeson said with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes, "would expect me to walk away from someone who treats genuine passion as a punchline. They would expect me to stand up for what I believe in, even when it's uncomfortable." "This is professional suicide," Norton warned, though his voice had lost all its earlier confidence. "No," Neeson replied, pushing open the studio door. "This is professional integrity. Something you might want to look into." The door swung shut behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded deafening in the silent studio. Norton stood frozen behind his desk, his mouth hanging open, staring at the closed door as if he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to applaud, boo, or simply sit there in shock. The cameras continued rolling, capturing Norton's bewildered expression and the empty space on the red sofa where one of Hollywood's most respected actors had been sitting just moments before. For nearly 30 seconds, nobody moved. Norton seemed to realize that the cameras were still running and that somehow he needed to salvage something from this disaster. "Well," he said finally, his voice shaky and uncertain, "that was certainly unexpected. But the damage was done." The interview that was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance had become something else entirely. A raw and unfiltered confrontation that laid bare the tension between entertainment and exploitation, between genuine emotion and manufactured drama. And somewhere in the BBC corridors, Liam Neeson was walking toward the exit, his dignity intact and his principles uncompromised, leaving behind a studio full of people who had just witnessed what happens when someone refuses to play by the rules of modern celebrity culture. That's the story of the night Liam Neeson walked off the Graham Norton show. And it's a reminder that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to participate in your own diminishment. What do you think pushed Neeson to his breaking point? Norton's mockery of his charity work or his attack on Neeson's character? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.